The basis of the sugar diet, the honey diet, what was found in some of the studies was your body produces something called FGF21, and they believe that FGF21 helps to boost your metabolism. What they saw was what they believed to be about a 20% increase in your metabolism. I do think that fructose and carbohydrate can be really beneficial. We're talking about glucose, right? So just because I'm mentioning carbohydrates, I'm talking about dietary carbohydrates, it doesn't mean that because you do your style of diet where you're doing a ketogenic diet and you're not consuming carbohydrate, you still have glucose. One of the reasons why I think it's a good idea to look at what bodybuilders do is because they do put that muscle mass on and they'll lose fat and they'll try to hold on to as much muscle as they can. For you, have you noticed if you drive your protein up, do you tend to get a little bit better pump? How does that work for you?
I get a good pump more so just with electrolyte manipulation. So I can be high fat or high protein. And the main thing I'm manipulating is the electrolytes. I do notice though that if I have a super heavy, I probably had, probably 400, maybe not 400, about 300 grams of protein last night for sure. I didn't count that one. And I noticed that my glucose, significantly increases and my ketones drop considerably with a heavy protein meal like that, but then it's back to normal the next day.
I think we unfortunately have a tendency to look at things as if they're bad. I've heard people kind of recently saying they think that, protein and maybe a saturated fat diet can cause some type of insulin resistance, but, maybe there's like a reason for it. And maybe it's like, we just tend to think that we tend to put things in a category, or we say things for the masses that isn't true for like a large subset of people as well. Sometimes, making a statement like that might not be true for you. Like your markers of blood and stuff like that might be not indicating any of those things. What's been your experience? Because you coach a lot of people with this diet too.
Well, everything needs just further defining, because like insulin resistance is a bad thing, quote unquote. But there's a difference between physiological insulin resistance and pathological insulin resistance. So like my wife, we just had our second kid, and pregnant women, appreciate it, man. Pregnant women, they have to take a glucose test. They give you like 50 or 100 grams of pure, glucose to see if you're going to have gestational diabetes. And she, having not had carbs in almost as long as me, would technically fail that test. So she just wore a glucometer for 2 weeks or a CGM rather, and passed it in flying colors with that data. But like, if your body's adaptable, so it's going to make the most of whatever you give it. And if you're not giving it many carbs, then those pathways are going to be down-regulated, but it doesn't necessarily a bad thing as long as you're giving it the right stuff, from everything else. So, yeah, defining everything is key, man. Like, people throw labels. Social media is bad. People just want to go for like the headlines, the sound bites. You get shade thrown at you all the time for the sugar diet stuff especially. But every time I've talked to you, you've been super reasonable. You're always just a guinea pig, self-experimenting, and we need that in the world for the most part, because people need to know what's possible, and they need to be smart enough to recognize that your results may not be the same for everybody, but you're doing it because you're curious, and curiosity is a key.
And I've done some things in the past. I've done, even in the book I wrote, The War on Carbs, I talked about like a fat fast and just primarily like running off of fat and just, I guess like experimenting and see what that'll do for you. But it can be inconvenient. Sometimes things are out of convenience. And something I shared with people for years is that some of what I've chosen over the years has to do with convenience. I utilized a ketogenic diet because I didn't want to be tethered to my food. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to have to walk around. Like, at least that was my understanding of bodybuilding and a bodybuilding style diet. And as I lost weight, I'm like, forget all this meal prep stuff, man. I don't want to be any part of that. I don't want to, cook up a bunch of chicken breast or whatever it is on Sunday and have that day be shot. I have 2 kids, and I'd rather be around my family rather than just sitting there prepping meals all day. And so I just started to kind of figure out like, well, what diet's going to work for me that's going to allow me more distance away from my food. And that for me at the time was high protein, high fat, because the fat is not only satiating and satisfying, but it has a delayed response in your body, takes longer to break down, longer to digest, makes all the other foods that you're consuming take longer to digest and so forth as well. So that's the style of diet I went with. And I used to tell people I chose this because it's easier. And I know that you can take that diet and make it difficult and you can get ready for a bodybuilding show. But most of the time, what I saw most bodybuilders do, I was like, that looks like I don't want to count calories. I don't want to be like trapped in trying to bring around my 6-pack bags or whatever with all the Tupperware and everything in there. And I'd rather find something that's going to allow me to eat a little differently. So I did those diets for years, and I've been experimenting with diets pretty much ever since. And even when I did carnivore, my brother and I went on the Joe Rogan show, and we talked about how we modified the carnivore diet. And then Rogan was kind of like, well, that's not carnivore anymore because you're adding in fruit, and then you got Saladino and some other people kind of found similar things. It's because you experiment, and that's why people end up with similar protocols. So I'm imagining people in the keto world that do a bodybuilding style diet, they probably end up having to follow a lot of your rules and principles because there's not that many different ways to get like completely shredded when you're talking about the specifics of a particular diet. And on the other side of things, when I've done a bodybuilding show before, I did do a bodybuilding diet, and it was like just cut and dry. Like you're going to do some cardio, you're going to eat carbs, you're going to lower your fats, and this is how you're going to do it. And when I ask questions, they're like, nope. I say, hey, what about, they're like, nope, can't do that. Can't do intermittent fasting. Can't do this, can't do that. And so there's a lot of rules associated when you're putting yourself on the line like that and you're putting yourself on a stage. But for average people who are just want to look better, feel good, be lean, I think they have a lot of options when it comes to different diets that they want to select.
Yeah, 100% agree, man. I feel like sustainability and convenience go hand in hand. And I mean, I used to do the whole bro diet too, like 6-7 meals a day. I'd carry my gym bag, my book bag in college, and another duffel bag full of Tupperware, eat every 2 or 3 hours, just being a slave to the clock. And I didn't like that. That's why I went keto. And for me, I'm more productive throughout the day because I can typically have like a fatty coffee and then maybe a brick or something post-workout, and then I'll be good until dinner and have typically 2 meals a day and not be fixated on food the rest of the day. And that was liberating. But yeah, you're right. When it comes to like bodybuilding level stage leanness, I mean, when you're getting sub 5% body fat, like you can't really do that intuitively because intuition forces you to eat more, So when you're trying to get to inhuman levels of, conditioning, you got to play by a certain criteria that is not natural. But nobody in the right mind should argue that that's healthy or optimal or sustainable long term. That's why I take 2 or 3 years off in between competitive seasons. Like I don't want to subject my body to those stressors for too long. So yeah, it's all about what you're wanting to do. But people that are just trying to live at a healthy body weight, healthy body fat, they've got all kinds of options at their fingertips.
I think in addition, I think there's like, I think each person wants to sort of prove their diet right, no matter how open-minded we are, we want to like prove that our thing works, So, here I am at 4% body fat, or here I am, at 48 years old, doing these various things. I like to encourage people. I get excited. So when I get excited, I'm going to talk about something more. But I do think that there are things that people should consider when they're looking at certain individuals and what they're doing. Dr. Sean Baker comes to mind. It's like, well, Dr. Baker is a badass. I don't know, if people have been around the guy, man, that guy is extremely intelligent. He's fun. He's also fun. He's fun to talk to. He's kind. He's not a dick. He maybe online he might be a little bit here and there to the vegan people that are mean to him. But he's a good dude. He's got a good heart, and he trains really, really hard. And then on top of that, I have no reason not to believe him. He's a natural guy, and he's 6'5", and he's like 250. And he's able to jump onto a box that's like 41, 42 inches, and he's nearly 60 years old. Mm-hmm. It's like, that guy's got my attention, like, wait a second, what is this diet that he's doing? And not to say that he's proving that his diet works, but at least it seems like the diet's working pretty well for him. And then he has a subset of people that follow him, and you see the testimonials about people healing, their skin and autoimmune disorders. There's a lot of weight loss as well. So I just don't think it makes sense to really discredit other diets. I think what we're all trying to think, I think we're all looking for is a way to eat a lot, but still be in really good shape. And there's different ways to do that. That's what I've discovered because I've done a lot of different style diets. I haven't done them all, but I've done a lot of different styles of diet. And the diet that I'm doing now is allowing me to eat a lot of food, and it feels really good. But I also have been in situations before where I've done keto style diets, carnivore diet, where I've eaten a lot of meat, 2-3 pounds of meat a day, 5-6 eggs every day, some cheese, some bacon. And it's like, man, right now I miss a lot of that. Those fats and stuff like that, they are, regardless of what they actually do inside the body, we can't deny how satisfying they are. They tend to they tend to scratch and itch. And maybe that's just because we have so many calories at our fingertips all the time these days. But man, does it feel good? One of my favorite things to eat in the world is a keto brick. And then also I love omelets.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was going to die, I would be like, hey, get me an omelet and get me a keto brick. And then you could take me out.
All right. Noted. Keto brick omelet, man, coming up.
That's right.
Yeah, I feel like people got to look at what they're wanting to accomplish and then adapt accordingly. There's a lot of people that do diets because they have the autoimmune issues, and that's going to be a limiting factor from them trying other options. Or psychologically speaking, people have negative relationships with food. Some things are trigger foods. I used to have really bad OCD, and that was motivating for me to adopt a ketogenic approach. And you got people like Chris Palmer putting out a bunch of research for what's happening in the brain with different types of diets and what's optimal in that regard. And I think all of that has to go into consideration and figure out what's sustainable. But people need to just not be dogmatic in their thinking either. I've done multiple different diets. I did several different diets before I went to keto. And in the 10, 11 years I've been keto, I've played around with multiple variations of keto. But I don't ever want to be living in this information silo that creates this dogmatic thinking and just backs you into a corner. And I feel like some people get in these diet war tribes, and then they're just totally unreceptive to anything and everything outside of that. And I think, we see that online all the time, especially with you. I mean, you're typically there's this weird outrage within the keto space right now because of the popularity of keto, or of the sugar diet rather, because it kind of, for whatever reason, hit a lot of people that were hardcore carnivore. So then you had these people that were jumping ship and doing the sugar diet from the carnivore community. So you've got the purist, talking smack, and you got these people that are guinea pigs doing their thing. And it's to each their own, let everybody figure out. Some people just have to learn on their own, and there's nothing wrong with that either.
It might just make you realize that the diet didn't work. The new diet you tried didn't work, or did work. And maybe even you try the diet, but it didn't work for you, but someone else in your family picks it up and it's effective for them. There's a lot of great things that can happen from trying something new and different. As far as health concerns go, I mean, I guess you can do something really wacky, crazy with your diet that would make you sick. And depending on your previous background, maybe depending on your liver health and all these different things that might go into you trying a new protocol. Those things can happen. I mean, if you're coming from a background where you're diabetic, if you're coming from a background where you have fatty liver already, and then you're trying something like the sugar diet, you're going to have to do so with knowledge. You're going to have to do so because if you just consume, even an average person who's used to sugar, if they just randomly eat a bag of candy, they may not feel well. They might not get sick, but they might feel like shit. But for somebody that already has some issues, it could potentially send them into a tailspin. They might have, end up with really high blood sugar or end up with really low blood sugar. It really just kind of depends on the person. And I don't think we've had a lot of situations before where we've kind of instructed people to, only eat this, only eat just straight. It's not really ever straight sugar because there's multiple sugars in just about everything. There's fructose and glucose, and there's all kinds of different shit going on with almost every single thing. I guess maybe with the exception of maybe even high fructose corn syrup has other other sugars in it. But it just, you have to be a little bit cautious. And if you are to mix carbohydrates, it actually gets to be safer. So if you are to have, let's say, like a rice cake or something, people think rice cake, oh, the glycemic index is nuts. It's off the charts. So maybe it's going to make you not feel so well. But it does have rice in it, and it has some sugar. And even if you were to dump honey on it, you're most likely not going to feel like crap from eating something like that, depending on how many of them you ate, though. And then the same thing kind of goes for like juice. Like most people can have 6 ounces of juice, 8 ounces of juice. But if you take like 12 ounces of juice and you pour it into a blender and then you blend up a bunch of fruit with it, and then you dump sugar in there and you eat the whole thing in one sitting, and the amount of time it takes you to eat a smoothie is pretty short. Well, now you might have just ingested 600 grams or 400 grams of carbohydrate kind of out of nowhere. And so you have to be, that's what I'm saying, you got to go into these things with knowledge. You got to have some sort of understanding. And it's good to jump into things. It's good to try new things, but then you have to try to do so in a reasonable way.
Yeah.
And you might say to yourself, okay, I'm going to try this, but like I haven't had 75 grams of carbs in a sitting in 3 years. Okay, well then let's start with, 50 grams of carbohydrate, see how you feel, and then you can start to go from there. But just be kind of cautious whether you're jumping into keto or jumping into this diet. I think it's good that people have the conjecture. I think it's good that people talk trash. I think it's good that people get a little angry. I think we should. I think we should be some red lights should be going off when somebody's talking about doing something that you haven't really heard anybody else talk about before, because you're like, well, why this guy? Why did this guy discover this thing that no one else knows about? And how come everyone else is talking completely opposite of what this guy's saying? So I think a lot of that caution is actually a good thing. It's a survival thing.
Yeah, no, I think I like being a contrarian with certain, because there's not many people doing bodybuilding with a ketogenic approach. So I'm kind of a contrarian in that regard. And I liked doing the opposite of what standard wisdom always was kind of preaching. I like controlling for variables so I can kind of tease out what is the actual catalyst for change and what's the moving piece here that's moving the needle. So on that note, like with you having done, because you weren't tracking your macros at all while you've been doing the sugar diet. You've been doing it for about 6 months now?
I've been doing about 6 months, and I've only tracked a little bit just using like Chat GPT and just, going back and forth with that. And I would say, 600 to 1,000 grams of carbohydrate. Maybe 1,000 is only something I've done a couple times, but maybe 600 to 800 grams of carbohydrate. Protein was like 150, 100 maybe per day ish. And then fat was just like try not to eat any. Yeah. So maybe 30 grams of fat in a day, depending on how much meat I ate in that day, or if I ate meat at all, because there were some days where I didn't consume anything other than the simple sugars.
And so from a total caloric ingestion standpoint, is that about what you were consuming? Because you were doing pretty much carnivore prior to this experiment, right?
My body's wired pretty good. I'm going to get the calories. Like my body, like it's just, if I don't eat enough, then the next couple days I'm just ravenously hungry. Yeah. So my body is calibrated for probably around 3,000 to 3,500 calories, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah, that's typically what I'm doing as well. 3,300 or so is my average. Unless I go to a Brazilian steakhouse, and it might be a little higher. But I was looking at a lot of the research, because I just did a 2-week stint of a similar FGF21 protocol, but with incredibly high fat and very minimal protein, minimal carbohydrates, because some assume that the efficacy of the sugar diet is by way more so of the lack of protein. So like I think throughout that experiment, I was consuming less than 9% of my calories coming from protein, which is pretty low, even though I've oftentimes played around with lower protein. So do you think the findings that you've had have been more so a result of the high sugar, or just minimal protein compared to what you're typically consuming?
I think for me personally, because of my background with mainly eating less carbohydrate, I think that the carbs were really helpful. I can't say that would be true of everybody else. But yeah, the basis of the sugar diet, the honey diet, some of this stuff got kicked around and boosted up from all kinds of different spots. You know, some people believe it's from some of Ray Peat's work, and Ray Peat was into talking about, you know, ways to increase the metabolic rate that didn't include necessarily like lifting, just included like what you ate, which I think that in and of itself is really fascinating to me. I have not really heard many people talk about that. It's normally like somebody wants to lose weight, you find a base calorie intake. Maybe some coaches take people up on calories a little bit for a couple weeks or a month, and then they start to bring them back down. And we always just adhere to this thing of like the calories are going to have to be a lot lower. But with this diet, what was found in some of the studies was, and there's not a lot of studies, I think there's only one human study, and then there's a couple studies on mice. What they think is happening is your body produces something called FGF21, and they believe that FGF21 helps to boost your metabolism. What they saw was what they believed to be about a 20% increase in your metabolism. That's quite a bit if that's truly what's happening. I don't think anybody truly knows whether this is exactly what's going on in the body, but at least in accordance to that study, and probably in accordance to some of the people that have had success on the sugar diet, maybe that is what's happening. I do think that fructose in certain amounts, I think can be really, and carbohydrate can be really beneficial to having the body kind of keep this, you know, flame, if you will, of keeping the body temperature maybe a little bit hotter. I don't have anything to support that. It's just a theory of mine. I know, again, if you go back to Ray Peat, he was really big on having people measure their, he would have people use a thermometer in the morning to measure their temperature. And he was saying that people should be a little bit higher than, I think, what, 98.6 is what's usually recommended. And he was saying like they should be a little bit higher. And he helped people figure that out via not just carbohydrate in particular, but even more specifically like dairy and a bunch of other things, because the calcium and those kinds of things can help your thyroid stimulating hormone, I believe. I may have some of this wrong. I'm not crazy into the Ray Peat stuff, but I know a little bit about it. So these are all things that people kind of have proposed. But yeah, I do think that carbohydrates, at least in my experience so far, in my experience when I did do a bodybuilding show, they seem to increase some sort of thermic effect for me. And again, sometimes it might be hard to tell with me because even when I did do a bodybuilding diet, I was still coming from a keto diet. So I did a bodybuilding style diet for like 10 weeks, you know what I'm saying? But I had a preload of being, I guess you'd say, like metabolically flexible. I also have been a person that even in my keto dieting, I have used carbohydrates, maybe a little bit more like Dominic D'Agostino, where I didn't always just flatline my carbohydrates. So yeah, that's some of my history. But I do think the carbohydrates were helpful, and supposedly they boost FGF21 as well, but I don't really know.
Yeah, everything. I mean, like I said, there's not a whole lot of studies. Everything I've read up on it. There was a study done in 2025, so this year, looking at participants, and they were not trying to lose weight necessarily. They found that they needed to increase calories by like 20% or whatever to just maintain weight. But they were doing by way of minimal protein consumption to also boost FGF21 hormone. That's kind of what I modeled my experiment off of, because I'm not trying to lose weight right now either. So I basically went up to 4,000 plus calories, and then 9% of which were coming from protein. And over the 2-week span, like I didn't really gain any weight. That's not very much time, but my testosterone more than doubled, which I thought was super interesting. Yeah, so I'd be curious to see if the same experiment was done with the higher carbohydrate relative to fat, but also minimal protein, what its effect on hormones would be. And I didn't test for FGF21 specifically, obviously, so I don't know there. But it did make me think, okay, if we can elevate that by way of the minimal protein in a short term, you're having a favorable effect on sex hormones and metabolic rate. That can be advantageous if you're in a prep, or if you're trying to like cycle that in during a building phase or something like that. So I've got my client that's in a prep right now doing that this week, actually. So we'll kind of see what the data shows afterwards. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I'm all about longevity as well. Like, what can I do and stick with for a lifetime? And I feel like the low protein, I don't think we need as much protein as often as, suggested. Because protein's kind of seeing its limelight halo days right now. Everybody's pushing for more and more protein. I think you can and should use it as a lever to pull. But I mean, at 9% of calories coming from protein, for me, that was like less than 100 grams a day, which probably wouldn't be optimal long term.
I think, if you think about like our history, it's not always good to like dive into our ancestry because like people just ate whatever they could eat to like stay alive, and we stayed alive doing a lot of weird stuff, being drunk is one of them or being high is another one, like we figured out ways to stay alive, through alcohol and through coffee and things that, I don't know, things that are like, you wouldn't really not necessarily recognize as like being healthy. But I think that if you're to think about it, why would there be any increase in anything in your body if you're not eating protein? And my only guess would be that maybe somehow your body's trying to sequester some sort of energy to give you like a second wind, if you will, give you more energy, supply you with energy, allow you to liberate more energy off of your body so that you can still go and get protein. Because you maybe had to hunt for it, you had to kill something, but all you're getting is like these little shrubs and little berries a little bit here and there, and you're barely surviving, and you're about to die. You're on day 5 of the sugar diet, 1,000 years ago, and you're withering down to nothing. And maybe the metabolic rate does increase a little bit because sometimes when you get hungrier, right, your focus can increase. Some of us know this from doing fasting or intermittent fasting or even being on a ketogenic diet, which sometimes can mimic some of the results of fasting. And you get your brain starts to get like wired in and focused in. And so maybe it was something that would, help us to make a last ditch effort to get more food or get more protein. That's kind of the only thing I can think of as to like why the body would do it. But I think the human body is so tricky, and I've always been kind of touting, like, I think it's a mistake to try to science the body. I think the body's more beautiful and more, it's harder to define than we can even possibly imagine. Like, we have a hard time defining it now. We had a guest on the show the other day talking about like fascia and talking about these different parts of the body and your big toe and your plantar fascia and your heel and your Achilles tendon. He's like, everything's all just one thing. It's like your fascia is just this like big sack. Everything's just like one thing, but we have to call things a bunch of different names so that we know what the hell we're talking about. And he said the ocean is the same way. There's 7 oceans, but they're all connected at some point. And so it's really just one. It's this one giant body of water, what we call Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, and so forth, to give us locations, to try to give us things to describe. And I think the human body is complex that way too, where it's hard to know. When somebody comes online, they say, hey, this is what I'm doing, this diet that I'm doing, and it's really working great for me. We don't know the other changes that may have happened in that person's life. First of all, I mean, they could be on TRT, which they never mention, right? So that's an obvious one. But they also could have had just a really big change in their life. Maybe they never really dieted before. Maybe they never had much of a diet protocol. And now they finally found one that they can actually stick to. And so the results of that ketogenic diet or high carb, low fat diet that they just did, it really had a huge impact on them. Not so much because of the diet. It had a huge impact on them because they could actually stick to it. So it's really hard to get the right context and to figure out who the hell's actually talking about what and what does it mean. We hear a lot of talk about vitamin D. And then you're like, well, are we talking about like the vitamin D that's naturally in your body from getting sunlight? Or are we talking about the supplement vitamin D? Hear the same thing about creatine. Like, you can go in the gym and do creatine-like workouts and have your brain go on fire from doing explosive movements and training yourself to be more and more explosive over time. I would say that beats the hell out of anything you're going to do longevity wise in taking a creatine supplement. I mean, it's just going to blow that. There's not even close. And the same thing with the vitamin D thing. It's like, get outside, so it's very hard to like sort of break all these things down and try to figure out where is any of it coming from. And on top of that, there's monetary gain that can be associated with a lot of these things. So it makes it even more difficult to figure out.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, you're a performance athlete. I'm a performance athlete where we're trying to figure out how to solve for that, last 1% and just reach that next level. And that kind of breaks all the rules and the things that we do, we wouldn't necessarily recommend for the masses. But like, I feel like there should be, I mean, you look at other species in the wild, like they know what to eat. They know how much to eat. Like you don't see these massive windows of ultra scrawny and like massively overweight, different animal species, but you see it in humans. And it makes me think, okay, we're so far removed from, being in tune with our body, what our natural call to hunger and satiety and the foods we should eat is, and that we've just bastardized it completely. And we're all running around not knowing what to consume. So I feel like we need to kind of hone in on what is the species appropriate diet for human beings. And we are incredibly adaptable, so we can get away with eating all kinds of shit. But like most of the population is not going to dive into the weeds on the research. They're going to be doing the extreme lifting protocols. So what does the masses need to move the needle in the right direction? Because right now it's certainly not headed in the right direction.
In modern times, I think we probably need to use modern stuff, So I think that, as much as I don't like all the different tracking, some of it drives me nuts because that's all people rely on. And then they're not like sciencing the body. It makes me sad. Really. I'd rather people not be so hooked into that. But then if they're not hooked into that, then the day gets away from them and then the next day gets away from them and so on. And they don't get their steps in, they don't get their movement in, their sleep starts to fall off because they're not tracking their sleep scores anymore. And everything just kind of falls apart. I've seen this happen with a lot of people. And when they have those metrics to look at often, then it's for some people, it's helpful. And then they can say, okay, yeah, I was off my calories last couple weeks. I went off the rails and did A, B, and C. And so I think that sometimes those things can be helpful. But what I mean by using like modern technology is, and I'm not trying to just sell your product, but is to use a keto brick, use modern technology, utilize a steak shake, utilize a total carnivore shake, utilize some of these hydration items that are out there from various companies, because it makes things more convenient. And if we're going to beat and defeat obesity, we need to, I used to kind of think we need to beat it by turning the clock back, we need to go back to the basics and back to this and that. And yes, some of that's true. But I think that the more we can use modern technology, probably the better off we are, just because things are so sideways. And yes, we do need to recalibrate our taste buds and we need to recalibrate our hunger signals. But for now, it's like, man, a lot of people really need these GLP-1s. People are in a lot of danger. People are in a lot of trouble. And I wish they didn't necessarily need these things, but I think that's just where we're at. And so what are other examples of modern stuff? Well, let's get some good modern shoes on so that we can get in a lot of steps every day so we don't hurt our feet, our knees, our back, and our hips. And then what's a good shoe? Have fun going down that rabbit hole, because that's a long story too. Everything's so commercialized and everything is for sale. So it makes it really hard. What's a healthy food? Shit, man. I don't even know what strength is anymore. That's how screwed up things are from seeing so many different images of strength now with the internet and seeing people demonstrate forms of gymnastics or forms of sprinting or explosive power in other ways that isn't just a bench squat and deadlift. When I was a kid, that was my world. That's all I knew. I didn't know anything different. And now we have the internet and shows you there's completely other aspects of strength. There's completely other aspects of nutrition and all these things. And so I think utilizing some modern technology The fact that you can just go to any grocery store or gas station and get fruit, I think is great. I think eating fruit is an awesome opportunity to not eat any fat. I think the same thing of vegetables. I think the same thing of very lean sources of protein, although some lean sources of protein come with at least some fat. But for somebody that wants to go down that style of diet, that's great news that there's not any fat in some of these things, because they're lower in overall calories, and it's going to supply you with a nice amount of energy. And when you're eating fruit and eating whole foods, I think almost all of us can agree that a lot of the whole foods are critical. And that's a form of technology. That's the fact that it's at every grocery store is a thing of modern technology. The fact that you can just go buy chopped up chicken breasts that are in a package is like a big form of like modern technology. And so it would be great if people went and hunted their own food and stuff like that. But like that stuff's not going to, we'll never be back. Well, never say never, but we most likely won't be back to those situations. And so I think we need to embrace some of these companies. Like my friend Ron Penna, he owns Legendary Foods, and they're trying to make these protein products that are like lower in carbohydrate and moderate to modest in the amount of fat that's in them. And he's trying to make them like 50% protein.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, man, if we make something that's 50, if I make a Pop-Tart that's 50% protein and tastes really good, it's like, how are you still going to be fat? You know, if someone can figure out shit like that, I don't think that's our only solution. I just think it's part of the solution, because then you get people to start to buy into other forms, other ideas of nutrition and other ideas of cleaning up their diet. They know they just can't eat a keto brick all day. They know they can't just drink my protein powders all day. They have to have real food that's going to encourage the body precisely on, how much to eat and all these things. We need good amounts of protein to help lower our satiation and all these things. But I think modern technology is going to be a really key factor to kind of help us get out of the situation that we're in, because it's pretty nasty.
Yeah, I think the technology will certainly help with the convenience factor. I think it has to be convenient for it to be applicable to the masses. And I would love to think, from a purist standpoint, that people would be motivated to get their food from the right sources and, put in some legwork to figure out where their food comes from and, vote with their dollar in that regard. Because, I do that. I know a lot of other people do that. Like, you get quality beef from Piedmontese. Like, we care about that stuff. I'm in Northwest Arkansas, so I'm like headquarters of Tyson Chicken, and I see those chicken trucks driving all day long, and it's like, I don't want to support that with my money. Like, I want to find a local farmer rancher or hunt my own food or be self-sufficient as possible and help the local community. But I don't know that there's enough people that think that way to move the needle on a broad scale. Probably not. But I think too, like humans are motivated for vanity purposes, and I'm confused as to why more people aren't motivated to get healthy and eat right and be more active, simply by way of not wanting to look like a slob and feel like a slob. Because, morbidly obese isn't really attractive from a vanity standpoint, so I don't know why that hasn't motivated more people to move in the right direction. I don't know.
And it's in everybody, like somebody who's 400 pounds, they see someone who's in shape and they could agree with other people that that's attractive. And they also understand that they also understand that they don't, at 400 pounds, they understand that other people aren't going to find them attractive for the most part. Hopefully there's somebody for everybody, but you know what I'm talking about. It's like in our, what's found attractive amongst men or what's found attractive amongst women, it's like embedded in our DNA. Sometimes you look at your wife and because she'll say like, "Oh, that guy's hot" or something, you'll be like, "Huh?" Because like you and I might not be able to recognize it right away, but the women sure do, and so do guys. But guys are like, we're a little bit more carefree with how many women we might say are hot, because we want a larger pool of opportunity, I guess you'd say. But yeah, it is interesting because I think all of us have like a lot of fight in us. I actually think that all human beings have a godlike feature within them. Like I think we have that much power. We have that much strength. It's just that like sometimes you got to get pressed up against the corner to really, and people have to be compromised. They have to really be compromised. You know, you ever have that buddy who's like, man, I don't know what I did to my shoulder, but it's just killing me and it hurts every week, every time I bench press. And you're like, hey, well, why don't you maybe just not bench press for a few weeks, rehab the shoulder a little, and there they are. They're still doing the same thing over and over again. It's because their shoulder actually doesn't hurt enough for them to do anything about it. Like, oh, you should go to my buddy, and you give him the number of your chiropractor or your friend that does body work, and like, oh yeah, they fixed my elbow and they fixed my knee, and I went for like 3 sessions and it wasn't that expensive, and it kind of hurts, but it got rid of it. A person's not going to go until they're compromised enough. And I've heard they've had some studies before where people need to have 3 near-death scares before they end up considering like a full-on intervention before they consider on their own to make a big change. And that's the same with like drug addicts. That's the same with people that are addicted to food. So you may have heard of your uncle, he had, unfortunately, he had to go to the emergency room. He had shortness of breath and he's got something going on. But then he never gets it checked out any further. He doesn't, and you could recommend stuff to him. You could say, oh my God, I listened to Peter Itia's podcast and here's like a bunch of things you can do. And he's going to have to get sick again. He's going to have to get sick again. And unfortunately, when it comes to something like a heart attack, a lot of people just have one. And that's it. So you don't get second and third chances with some of these like life-threatening things that could be happening to us. So I think it's like, I guess people are so far removed from stuff that they don't know or remember, what it feels like to, do a couple pull-ups or hit a baseball when you're 7 or 8 years old, and how good it feels to run and sprint to first base, or how good it felt to, just play kickball in PE in school or whatever it might be. I think it's just people are like 20, 30 years removed from that, and now they're so big and they're in a lot of pain. And I think the kind of last thing on their mind is like, going to the gym. They understand what a commitment it is, and I don't blame them because it is a commitment. The gym is a real bastard and takes many hours of time for you to be able to get a lot of the results that you're looking for. And exercise seems very bleak. I think some of the reports and some of the information about exercise, I think, is a little bit on the low end, where they'll say, it only makes like a 5 or 10% difference and stuff like that. I think it makes a bigger difference, especially over time. And I think it helps with adherence all the way through with the rest of your life because it causes a cascade of disciplines to happen. But I do understand why people don't do it, because they're still on the other side and it's just overwhelming. They're like, man, this whole thing seems completely overwhelming. I got to lift, and then I got to do like this special shopping with my food. And like you and I might say like, no, it's not really that way, but it is actually really that way. Like this is a massive overhaul. This is you changing basically everything about yourself, even though we're really just talking about food and really just talking about you changing out the type of pleasure that you're engaging in. You're still going to have pleasurable food. And that's why it's great to have options with diet, because you can do a keto style diet, or you can do a high carb, low fat style diet. And you can pick a flavor that you want. Like which side do you kind of want to be on? Or if you want, you could even be in the middle. But then you have to count calories all the time, and that might be too meticulous for some people.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of is like a standard issue. Like what has been deemed socially acceptable as a standard has gotten so lax over the years that there's no really sense of embarrassment in society. Because like you and I have high personal standards for ourselves. We have high individual standards. Like if you put on 30 pounds of pure fat, you would be deemed socially acceptable in society. You would probably still have pretty solid health markers. Like you wouldn't be shamed for that. Like you would beat yourself up internally, but from a society standpoint, you're looking pretty good still. And I feel like as individuals, we've kind of gravitated more towards the socially acceptable standard as opposed to doubling down on our higher individual standards. And for that reason, people have just let themselves go more freely, which is unfortunate. But I don't know how to spark that in people to double down on what they're capable of and their own personal standards. I feel like we all need to hold ourselves. I mean, we do have an incredible body. We have one. That's our fortress, our temple, whatever you want to call it. That's our meat sack for walking around during our lifetime. And then it's over and done with. It's gone. And I feel like we don't give that the credit it's due, and we don't treat it as we should. And it's unfortunate. It takes 3 near-death experiences for people to wake up to the fact that that's not sustainable.
I would like to see a lot of things change, but I just don't think that they will. Like, I don't understand why there's like such an association with like your dentist. Like, most people that have insurance that like give a shit about their teeth, they go to the dentist like twice a year. And what about your kids? Your kids go to the dentist twice a year, right? But how come there's no other medical intervention at all? I mean, if you have kids and you give a shit about your kids, like you'll take them to the doctor for checkups and stuff like that here and there, but it's not the same. The dentist is twice a year. They check your teeth twice a year like clockwork. Every once in a while you miss an appointment and you got to either reschedule it or you'll see them a year from now rather than 6 months from now. But I don't understand why it's not routine to just go and communicate with the doctor when you're 17, 18, 19, 20, 23, 25. It should be. It's maybe a little bit more, you'll see it a little bit more from women because women with like birth control and like various things. But yeah, it's crazy how absent that is. And I'm not saying that doctors are like the answer or anything necessarily, but it's great to have some sort of conversation with somebody that is trained medically to give you some advice. I mean, even if they just weigh you and tell you like, hey, you're 40 pounds overweight or you're 20 pounds overweight. Now they might prescribe you a bunch of stuff and you might not like that, but hopefully that still leads to some sort of change where you say, oh man, like this guy's prescribing me statins and I'm only 38. I don't know if I need those. But like, instead of only taking the drug, I'm going to take the doctor's advice. You know, hopefully he has sound advice. I'm going to take his advice, but I'm going to start an exercise regimen along with it. You know what I mean? Like, and so I would love to see some of those changes happen. It does seem like people are starting to get their blood work done more often. And that's a pretty good move in the right direction. But I think that that's still on the newer side of things. And like, we probably need to continue to learn more. But man, how great would it be if it was just standard? And the standard blood work that you might get from a regular doctor is usually not very good. They're just going to check like your cholesterol and like they don't really check much of anything else. So there's just seems like there needs to be so much intervention that it's crazy. But I think where it all starts is it starts with parenting. And unfortunately, parents just suck. They're really bad at it. There's so much neglect going on in this country that it's just like, it's completely unbelievable. And I think neglect is the most hurtful thing out of everything. Because if you're only in the other room and you're not paying attention to me, that's more, I'd rather have somebody beat me every day than to like be there all the time, but not actually be there for me. And I think that's what we're seeing in society right now. And I know that's probably like a bold statement, but neglect is really hurtful. I mean, most people that I talk to that as an adult, a lot of times it's what the parent didn't do for them. And it's not what the parent did to them. I have friends where their dad beat the shit out of them every day. And there's some guys that are like, yeah, my dad just didn't know how to show love and he drank too much. But I have other friends that are really hurt and they can't get out of their own way these days. And it's because their dad never congratulated them. It's because their dad never told them that they did a job well done. It's because their dad was like there-ish, but just neglected them. And there's so many kids neglected and they're just like on their tablet or on their phone. And no one's kind of there's no one leading by example, showing them what a healthy lifestyle looks like. And a lot of times what I see from a lot of people is people complain about money, but then they order DoorDash. People say one thing and they do another, and they do it over and over again. And your kids pick up on all that stuff. They see all these things. They hear you saying, "Oh no, hey, don't, I'm emailing somebody," right? When the parent is on the phone. But when the kid is on the phone or on the tablet, the parents come in, they just interrupt right away, and they don't ever. There's no conversation with the kids, like time to put that away, and they chuck it off into the corner or whatever. And I've seen this happen with a lot of different parents, and I'm like, this is a major problem. There's a disconnect between the parents and between the kids, and they don't have a good role model in terms of like just what to eat and how to act. And you don't have to necessarily eat the way that you and I eat, because we're doing stuff that's like, I don't know, 3% or 1% or 0.001% of the population even cares about, right? Like we understand that. But what about just showing your kids there's like just good options? Like have some blueberries in the fridge, have some apples, have like just a variety of foods around, so your kids see that there's a lot of options, and all these options actually taste good. Because people think the only thing that tastes good, like a lot of kids, a lot of teenagers these days, they think the only thing that tastes good, like my daughter's friends, my daughter's 17. My daughter's like, "Dad, they don't eat real food, like ever." And I'm like, "Shit." And he's like, "Yeah, only." My daughter said, "Only when they come over our house, they actually have real food." So it's amazing, and so I think that we need better leadership from parents. But I think parents feel like they're too far behind. Parents are sick themselves, or they're getting there. They're fat. They're overweight. They're working all the time. But I think everyone's just sort of like making their day and making their life a little bit harder than it needs to. And they're just like overly stressed out. They don't know how to deal with the stress. And if you worked out and if you ate properly, you'd be able to handle the stress easier. Maybe the stress would still bother the hell out of you. And that's fine. But it's going to be easier to handle it when you're doing other stuff.
Yeah, and some things aren't supposed to necessarily be easy. Like you acclimate to it, like effort's required in life. You know Bill Schindler, are you familiar with him?
No.
Bill Schindler's awesome. I can get you connected. He's one of my best friends. We hunt together. He has this company called Modern Stone Age Kitchen, but like he's got great kids. They're all super well mannered, well behaved, great functioning family unit, which is rare these days. But he's a big advocate for, everybody working together to make a meal from scratch, which does require effort. It's definitely harder than, picking something out of the freezer and sticking it in the microwave for a minute and a half. But like they do that on a regular basis. They own a restaurant too. They all work together in that. But simply taking something from scratch, whether it be a chicken, pork, whatever, you don't have to go to that extreme with it, but like all of the family preparing it together, a wholesome, nutrient-dense meal as a family unit. Like if people just simply made that one shift, whether it was, carbohydrate-based or protein-based or fat-based or whatever, but they all just did that with predominantly real food and bonded as they did it, I think that would solve a lot of problems.
That sounds huge. I'm going to check into the guy. I mean, you said you'll link me up with him. That would be great. Have you had Joe English on your podcast, Joe Brindley?
Yeah, I've had him on twice, I believe. It's funny because he reached out to me when I very first started putting information out about keto, like way back in the day, like 2016 or something like that. And he and I were talking and we just hit it off. He said that I reminded him of him when he was my age, and just, I don't know, we just had good vibes. I've had him on my podcast a few times. He's done all kinds of crazy experimentation as well. And he's been like, I respect people that have been in the sports, been in the space for a long time, and like they're consistent. Like he's played around with multiple different types of diets, but his overarching messaging's always been on point. So yeah, I like Joe a lot. He's a good guy.
Yeah, I know that he's got a lot of information about like the FGF21, and he's even taken a step further because he ate candy for like 3 months straight.
Yeah.
which is like pretty wild. He tells me still to this day, he's like, I just get busy and I just like reach for candy. I'm like, I don't know how you do that without like having your teeth rot out of your head. Because like I'll eat candy like a little bit, but it just doesn't feel right to me. So I'm like, I don't want to, I don't want to end up having my teeth ripped out of my head or end up with any like toothaches or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I used to eat a lot of candy. My brother, he's 2.5 years younger than me. He's a Boilermaker, and he's taller than me, skinnier than me, doesn't have near as much muscle, doesn't lift or anything, but he's like physically active, working 12-hour shifts, welding all day long. And he eats a ton of candy, man. Like his main staple is gummy bears. And I'm like, man, you're quote unquote healthy on paper right now. But he'll be the first to tell you that, his line of work, his lack of sleep, like he's starting to feel it in his aches and pains and joints and everything. I'm like, man, you're not giving your body any real fuel, and you're just reaching for that out of sugar, dopamine hit, and convenience. But it's like you can't do that for the next 30 years and expect to see, health in your future. So yeah, I'm a big like forward thinking longevity thing. I'm a bit of a purist, so I'll take that for what it is. But I want to know my local farmer rancher, eat real food, be somewhat ancestral in that regard. But I want to eat in a way that I'm excited about eating over the next 50, 60, 70 years. And I feel like if you look through life and the decisions you make through that lens, that definitely points you on a narrower path, but a better path, I would argue.
Yeah. And for me, like right now, with eating I'm no stranger to eating like rice. Again, even on my lower carb protocols, I've eaten rice, I've eaten potatoes. I've talked about this many times before. I used to actually just eat potatoes usually instead of rice, just because it was easier to eat less potatoes. And rice, for me, it's easy for just like take out, cups and cups of rice. But, I can picture doing this diet for a long time, or at least utilizing it intermittently alongside some other protocols. I wouldn't be surprised if like in the wintertime, I just want more fat. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I wouldn't be surprised if in the wintertime I'm like, maybe I'll just do, more of like a keto style diet or a lower carb diet and just bring the fats up for a little while. I mean, why not, right? I think you think about what bodybuilders do. And again, I don't think, we should just like follow bodybuilders, but I think that bodybuilders have created a cool path for us, because I do think that between the ages of, maybe 15 to like 60 almost, I think we should try to put some muscle mass on, or at least hold muscle mass, find a nice amount of muscle mass to hold on to and either keep it or try to continue to gain some muscle mass. And, when I think about that and I think about, the different styles of diet that I've utilized, all of them can work, towards, holding on to muscle mass, building muscle mass. I just always felt a little bit more comfortable when it came to gaining strength and when it came to gaining muscle mass, eating a little bit more carbohydrate.
Yeah.
That's been my, own experience with that, and like almost like hydrating the muscles with the carbohydrates and stuff. And we have to keep in mind, again, like, what are we talking about here? So like, we're talking about glucose, right? So just because I'm mentioning carbohydrates, I'm talking about dietary carbohydrates. It doesn't mean that because you do your style of diet where you're doing a ketogenic diet and you're not consuming carbohydrate, you still have glucose. And you might have the same amount of glucose. That's what gets weird about this stuff, is like you might have the same amount of glucose running through your bloodstream as somebody that follows a diet that has higher carbohydrate or even high carbohydrate. But what I feel personally is and I don't know this for sure, but I feel like that when I eat carbohydrates, dietary carbohydrates, I feel as if those carbohydrates, when they break down into glucose, I feel like they're in my muscle tissue. Whereas when I've done keto, I feel like somebody kind of sucked the glucose out of my muscle tissue. I just didn't feel like it was still there the same way. And I would feel like a little empty. It wasn't like I couldn't get a pump. It wasn't like I couldn't have a good workout. it just, in comparison to me having carbohydrate and being able to fill the muscle tissue up with sodium, potassium, and all the different things that, at least what I believe glucose can help deliver to the muscle tissues, it just didn't feel like the same thing. And again, I don't have any proof or evidence that's the case or not the case, but it's just a feeling that I've had.
Yeah, I mean, there's been studies, like the faster studies show that you're able to repair, replenish, and replete muscle glycogen independent of carbohydrate consumption once deeply fat adapted. And people will argue all day long, what is the length of time necessary for depth of fat adaptation? And I've always said, 6 months. Because like when you go from a carbohydrate based diet or higher carb diet, and then you go keto, you're going to feel pretty flat for the first several weeks, possibly several months. And a lot of people, most people, don't really have the staying power to stick with it, 6 months strictly to be able to have an accurate comparison. I used to eat all the carbohydrates. I know what I felt like then. I know the vascularity I had. And I've got more vascularity and fullness on stage now when I'm dialed in for a show than I did back then. But I've been doing this strictly now for 10 years. Do I think you need to be doing it strictly for 10 years in order to have all those metabolic pathways in place? Probably not. Nobody would do it if that was the case. But it is one of those things where I think it gets better the longer you do it, and that you're no longer sacrificing that fullness once that length of adaptation has been met.
What do you think about when you start to pull body fat off of your body, you burn fat? Do you think that fat is a similar nutrient as compared to dietary fat? Similar.
I mean, when you're burning fat, whether it's dietary or, adipose tissue, like you can create ketones. People can take exogenous ketones now. You can have those that cross the blood-brain barrier to provide cognitive enhancement. But from a cellular standpoint, how that interacts with the body is going to be pretty similar. From an energy standpoint, if I'm taking in, I feel like there's a point of diminishing returns. Like if I'm ever consuming just like a massive bolus of energy, whether it's, for my case, it's going to be fat and protein. But if I'm taking in too much fuel, I almost start to feel lethargic. So that's kind of defeating the purpose there. But like if I'm in an extended fast, or if I'm super depleted, or if I'm low body fat, I notice a profound benefit from a bolus day of, higher dietary fat to provide that influx.
Yeah, I just like super curious about all this stuff. Like it seems like a calorie surplus isn't really, it seems like a calorie surplus is not necessarily healthy for us, but it's not necessarily healthy for us over like a long period of time.
Yeah.
So again, like kind of looking at what bodybuilders do, it's like, well, a caloric deficit also isn't really that healthy either.
But
for sure. It's context dependent, right? Like if you have 50 pounds to lose, well, then a caloric deficit sounds like it's going to be one of the healthier choices you can make because you have to address weight loss at some point. And then a caloric surplus can be something that could be great for some people, especially people that are just very thin, or somebody that has been dieting for a long time to start to bring their calories back up. And that's what I was going to say earlier, and I kind of lost my point, was that bodybuilders, they build and they lose, they build and they lose, they build and they lose. And what they're trying to do over time is have their muscle mass just creeping up slowly. And whether it's a guy that's enhanced or a guy that's natural, it's going to be super slow anyway. Because what people don't realize about the guy that's enhanced, the guy that is enhanced, he's enhanced and now he's at this higher level. But just because he's enhanced, he doesn't just go with his muscle mass. He goes almost just as slow as the other guy. Now, he's got different options. He might be able to change drugs. He might be able to do a little bit more here and there. But in the end, it's actually the same thing. We're just talking about somebody that's 20, 30 pounds heavier than the person that's natural. But one of the reasons why I think it's a good idea to look at what bodybuilders do is because they do put that muscle mass on and they do lose that fat. They put the muscle mass on and they do lose. So they may they'll acquire more muscle mass and they'll acquire more fat. And then they'll come back down the other side and they'll lose fat and they'll try to hold on to as much muscle as they can. And if they do it correctly over time, they will have created a situation where they are kind of continually increasing their muscle mass. Maybe it's just ever so slowly increasing their muscle mass and continuing to bring that body fat level down and just create a body that's just maybe operates at a little bit higher metabolic rate because they're mainly just muscle tissue at some point.
Yeah, I think regardless of the diet people are following, there's extreme health benefits from a metabolic standpoint to have periods of time when you're in a deficit, periods of time where you're in a surplus, always within a healthy range. Because in the competition prep for me, I mean, that was not healthy for that very finite period of time. But modulating between being in a surplus, being in a deficit is super advantageous metabolically speaking. And it takes time to build legitimate skeletal muscle tissue. So it stands to reason that you should spend more time in a surplus than in a deficit. So I feel like, like a 3-to-1 ratio or something of that nature. But if everybody did that, whether they were ever planning to compete as a bodybuilder or not, would benefit from it metabolically speaking, for sure.
It's really interesting because I bet your body is trying to do that anyway.
Yeah.
Just like your body intuitively is trying to eat less at certain times of the year. And at certain times of the year or just certain days, you're just more hungry or less hungry. It seems like the body wants to do it. And it's interesting to have it scheduled. For these 3 months, I'm going to increase my calories for a little while. It seems to make a lot of sense that would make you feel really good. And then for a period of time, you're going to lower your calories. And for me, it's been kind of annoying because I've been on this weight loss mission for so long, I haven't had an opportunity to come up for air because I mean, I've done so a little bit throughout the years because it's coming down from 330, that was 15 years ago. So I have kind of staggered it, over time. But yeah, this last dip down to 200 has been a real bitch. And then because I added the carbohydrates back in, and because of the way I'm able to work out right now, I'm able to lift heavier. I'm able to add more volume. So it's man, it's going to get harder and harder to get down to that 200-pound mark. I'm still about 15 pounds off.
You 215 right now then?
Yeah. 215.
What were you when you and I were lifting together?
Not too much different. Maybe 210, 212.
Yeah. When you were 330, because I look back, because I bulked up to 230 at my heaviest pre-keto days, and I was just I didn't have a coach. I was watching YouTube videos of all the, Lee Priest, all those, that era of bodybuilders, and they were just
I can get talked about enough. Lee Priest is amazing.
Yeah, he's a stud, man. But all of them, on YouTube, they'd have their eating videos, are just all just, hating the next spoonful, and they're eating, and I'm okay. That's what I got to do to get big. So I did the same thing, man. I was eating a ton of calories, every 2 hours, but just feeding past the point of satiety and force feeding to get bigger. And I got bigger, I got stronger, but I don't ever really do that now. But I could eat way more than I do. If I just allow myself to eat ad libitum, then I'd probably just get fat, even with the cleanest of keto quality foods. I just like to eat food.
Yeah, I would say, for myself too, when I've done a keto diet, even the carnivore diet, for me, it was a little bit easier. It felt easier for me to overeat on those diets as opposed to what I'm doing now. Although I could probably figure out ways of overeating on this, but when you really just limit the fat, it just gets to be hard. And then to a certain extent, things just sort of stop sounding so appetizing. I mean, how much chicken and rice are you going to eat, or how much white fish or scallops and rice, or it's how much of this stuff you're really going to eat. It can become more fun when you start to add in some other things. I've been having this such a great combination. I've been having Frosted Flakes and rice together. It's the greatest. That's from Joe. Joe English is the one who brought that up to me. And I was that sounds really weird. And I tried it, and the guy was right, man. It was completely
Frosted
unbelievable.
flakes and rice.
So
Interesting.
with some foods like that, it can be easier to like overeat and like demolish food. But I kind of personally have a hunch, or just think that, or not even a hunch. I think it's fairly well known. I think when you're eating fat, it's a little easier to have that fat become your body fat. And when you eat a large surplus of carbohydrate, I think it's harder for the body to, turn that into body fat in the absence of fat calories, so I don't really truly know. I don't know what the science says on that. I think I have heard Lane Norton talk about that before, where he felt like it was like maybe 70% of the calories from fat, when you're overdoing your fat, can go to stored body fat. And maybe when it was carbohydrate, maybe it was more like 40 or something like that. But I'm pulling some of those numbers out of my ass, but I remember him talking about something.
Yeah, I remember that. He made like a graphic because people were coming at him saying, hey, if you eat more fat, you burn more fat, which is true, but it's all just the energy pathway. Like if you eat more carbs, you burn more carbs, but then the effect on adipose tissue winds up leveling out or something to that effect. I'd have to go back and look at it. But yeah, I remember them. But yeah, I don't know. I guess just guys like you and me, man, we lift heavy weights and we just want to eat a lot of food. That's just reality of it.
Yeah, I love food, and I love exploring these different diets. I love exploring different training techniques. I mean, a lot of stuff I do, like I'll just say this too, flat out. I mean, just to be totally transparent and honest with people, a lot of stuff I do doesn't even make any sense. I just do it because it calls to me. I just like enjoy it. I did a workout the other day. I did leg press back and forth with pull-ups and bench press. I was like, what workout is that? Well, I don't know. I just like, I have those machines at my house. I have a setup at my house where I can kind of bounce around to different things. And I've done a bunch of workouts like that before, where I might be supersetting like lunges and lateral raises. Like I didn't get it from like a book or anything. I'm just training and I'm just having fun. Now, should somebody else like do that exact same thing, maybe they would find benefit in it. Maybe they would like it, or maybe they'd hate it. I don't know. But for me,
you're not running anymore right now, right? You hurt your ankle.
Yeah, my heel is still recovering, but it should be good. I'm thinking sometime next month I should be ready to go, because it's feeling better every day. And I'm at the point right now where I probably could run, and so I'm getting excited. But I'm like, you know what? You still got to give it. You still got to give it a little extra time, because I don't want to get back out to run and then just hurt myself. Yeah, so that's been the other thing with this diet, is I've been able to lean out and without any cardio. I mean, I'll do a little bit of cardio stuff within some of my workouts, but I think when I get back to running, I think that's going to have a huge impact on even getting leaner. Although running can be really weird, because running can make you look flat and make you look fat in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I don't ever like the way I look when I do a lot of running. I don't do a ton of running, but I always feel flat and washed out when I do it. Like Stairmaster's always been my go-to form of cardio, but I don't do much of that. Like I'm pretty minimal with the cardio.
Yeah, I think, in terms of some cardio, if I could, run, 2-3 miles a couple times a week along with some sprinting, I think that will have a big impact on my physique. It's a matter of being able to handle it. Like if I'm running 2 or 3 miles and my heart rate's 170, then that probably have a negative impact on me, as opposed to if I'm running a little bit more casual. And then on the days where I'm sprinting, I'm running much shorter distances. I think that'll have I think that'll create a good environment for me to get more shredded.
Yeah. More shredded, man. That's the goal. What's gets you excited, man? I know we're coming up here past the hour mark, but you're about to leave on a trip to Scotland, I think, right?
Yeah, I'm going to Scotland and Ireland. My wife is over there right now. She's swimming in some of the channels and shit like that in Scotland, and she's bouncing from like island to island, I guess. And I'm going in a couple days with the rest of my family. So I'm going with my daughter and my son, my two of my brother-in-laws, my sister-in-law, and a bunch of their kids. So it should be an amazing time. I'm really looking forward to it. Just, business wise and, career wise. I mean, I always love doing the podcast. I love communicating with the different people that I get to communicate with. And it's just, and maybe you found this to be true for yourself. And I don't know if it's because we cherry pick these things and we make them happen, or if they just actually happen. But it's really weird because we'll have a guest on the show, and the guest on the show might say, I actually found that, training the tibialis is like really key for this particular thing or whatever, right? And then, a guest or two comes on, and then like the next guest that comes in says the same thing that first guy said. And then it'll be like another guest down the road will mention something similar to that first guy again. And you're like, what's going on here? So it's exciting to me to kind of hear, and even with this sugar diet stuff, hearing so many people talk about their success with low fat diets, it's been really cool. And some people are like, oh yeah, I used to do that. And then I, ended up, switching diets or whatever it is, because they just thought that wasn't the right thing to do. They, thought that their hormones would tank, or they thought all these horrible things were going to happen, and they didn't really notice any of that. But it's just interesting how when I get these different guests on the show, how these particular ideas that maybe are sort of forming in my head or forming in the head of Nsima, how those things end up, they kind of just keep swirling around to the point where we're like, oh yeah, we got to like try that. We got to go do that. And we get a lot of encouragement from those types of things on the show.
Well, you're great at just bringing on guests from all different walks of life. I think that's the key, man. Like open dialogue, open discussion, like not allowing yourself to become victim to that information silo and dogmatic in your thinking. So yeah, man. I mean, I love y'all's show. I've found some great people through y'all's show. So keep doing what you're doing there for sure.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Mark, always a pleasure, man. Enjoy Scotland, wear a kilt, do all the good stuff, and we'll be in touch, brother.
Thank you so much.
See you, man.